Not yet, right?
Not at ma'am. Not.
Okay, 1 second. Yes, now I think you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I think you had a great exams by now. You must be like really expert in writing exams and how to crack all of those would have been like with you already. What I will do is for the auditing examination, like quickly, maybe we'll spend 15 minutes from now to just quickly revise some of the important keywords, concepts, etc., and talk about what exactly you'll have to do in the examination, more from presentation aspects, right? So writing like keywords, and those are the things we'll just touch upon, like just kind of to help you, like what is those last minute preparations that you should be careful about. So coming to, I think a definition is where we started auditing all about, and I think we'll also have a revision with definition, and I hope that you will also have a very good examination where you can actually get to write this definition. So we spoke about auditing is independent examination of financial statements of an entity, whether profit oriented or not, and irrespective of legal size or form, when such an examination is conducted with a view to express the opinion thereon, right? So coming back to quick revision of your auditing as a subject, I would now not go back to, I think, a examination pattern. It's again the same thing, right? It has MCQs and the descriptive answers. You have 14 chapters altogether in auditing, including the standards in auditing. So covering all of that, I think, you would have already studied. Whatever you've studied is absolutely sufficient. You don't have to now at the last minute worry that, okay, I've not studied this essay, not read this definition. I think this is something you've been hearing in most of the revision sessions, that do not get panic at the last minute. So I'll not repeat, for the benefit that you've already cracked few exams and you are now confident on your mental preparedness of the exam, right? But from the quick revision perspective, if you've done these revisions of the chapter, what is that you need to keep in mind on chapter 1? Whenever there's a question on objective and scope of audit, there'll be direct questions on objective and scope of audit, right? Very less possibility of case studies in chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, for that matter, right? It's more of a direct or an indirect questions or interlinking questions that you will get in examination. So you'll have to keep that in mind in terms of your quick last minute revisions, that strategy of audit, aspects related to audit, advantages of audit, auditing interlinked to another disciplines, right? What are the different types of audit? So the basics of that has to be in your mind very clearly, and have interlinking of some essays in your mind very clearly. Like for example, for chapter 1, the interlinking essay is 200 series, right? The objective is in essay 200. 210 is scope. So you know that 200 and 210 overall objective of an audit, and then the agreeing to the terms of an audit engagement makes up your chapter 1. So these are the interlinking standards that you need to keep in mind. You also need to keep in mind some of the interlinking sections when the question comes from objective or scope of audit. There are some interlinking sections related to Companies Act. For example, 143 subsection 3 is an interlinking section for the entire audit report related matters. Section 143 as a whole is interlinking sections for rights and duties of an auditor. It has 15 subsections in it. Just keep that in mind, because objective and scope is derived from the Companies Act perspective as well, right? Be very careful when you're getting the question, that what is it they're actually asking in the question. Something that you know exactly from the study material, try to first write. Don't try to explain whatever you know and then come to the study material point. Write what you know from the study material, then explain. For example, if some of you have read objective of an audit as primary and secondary objective, this is an explanation, right? But the objective of an audit has got 3 points as per SA 200, right? So we know that these are the 3 points: RSMM, SAAE, and audit opinion, risk of material misstatement, sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and the issue of or expression of an audit opinion. So we know that that's how SA 200 defines the objective, right? Unlike how we would have read in some of the authors' books that, okay, it is primary and secondary objective. No harm in writing that, but if you know what is there in the study material, try to first populate, because it gives examiner a confidence that you have read something which is relevant from the ICI study material perspective. If you haven't read study material, you've read any of the notes, as I said, everything is perfect. Just ensure that you reproduce an authoritative guidance to start your answer, and then maybe have an explanation further just to give an impression that you've stuck to something which is authoritative from ICI perspective. Then coming to chapter 2, if you have any questions around audit strategy, audit planning, and audit program related matters, think about overall strategy for an audit, right? So what exactly should be those aspects to be covered in audit as like back of your mind. Remember those bullet pointers that you need to code. Most important point in examination is knowing your pointers right? When you're reading the question itself, if the question is related to overall strategy of an audit, then you should know, okay, for overall strategy, like these are the pointers that I need to write. For example, vouching, right? For example, assertion, for example, completeness, right? So these are some of the points which is covered under overall strategy, and these are the 7 8 pointers my answer should contain. So have that particular frame of thoughts ready in your mind. Unlike a right law answer where you have to interlink a lot of sections and maybe do case study oriented answer, in auditing, your ability to know the pointers are very important. You should know which points I should write for which answer, right? Rather which question. So audit strategy and audit planning and audit program, you know which are the essays to be interlinked. Keep in mind the essays that we need to interlink here is essay 300, essay 315, right? And interlink about essay maybe to an extent essay 320, because materiality in planning and performing the audit is important in this chapter, right? Remember those 4 pointers of audit planning that you should keep in mind, like knowledge of business, timing, extent, and nature of work, right? Internal control and coordination of work. Those are the 4 different pointers under audit planning, right? Remember revision of audit planning. What are the different steps in audit planning? So keep those things handy in your thoughts, right? And whenever you get questions related to audit documentation and audit evidence, you have to be slightly more broader in this chapter, because documentation involves all the essays into consideration, right? If they're talking about a question related to inventory, for example, the documentation should have an interlink to 230, which is audit documentation. It should have an interlink to 501, which is specific consideration related to inventory. Right? Those are the 2 pointers I think we should keep in mind with respect to audit documentation. Like let's say if there's a question on related party transactions, right? How do you document the audit work paper? You need to now keep in mind this is related to 230, but also has an element of 550 in it, right? Related party transactions. So you'll have to keep those things in mind in terms of audit documentation. It looks like a simple question, but see which is the other interlinking essay that comes into picture in audit documentation. You'll have to be slightly good about your permanent audit file, current audit file. The audit file has to be completed within 60 days of completion of an audit. It has to be maintained for 7 years of group auditors policy, or 7 years, whichever is earlier. I think those things you should keep in mind. It's important that from a SA 200 perspective, audit documentation is complete. If an auditor does not follow with standards on auditing, there's a deviation from the standards, and the deviation can only come when there's an exceptional circumstances, and there are some special audit procedures that has been designed for the purpose of audit. So you'll have to keep this in mind. Remember about some of the procedural matters, right? Alternative audit procedures are different than additional audit procedures. I do alternative when I don't get to do one, right? I do the other alternatively. I do additional when I'm not happy with what I already did. I'll do additional to supplement extra, right? So you'll have to be careful about your choice of words when you're writing about documentation related matters or procedure related matters in audit evidence. Be very careful about your choice of words. For example, applicable financial reporting framework versus acceptable financial reporting framework. The choice of the word has to be right in the right context. So keep that in mind, bear that in mind while you're writing the exam answers. And coming to audit evidence in the chapter, audit evidence, I think I would not now say important, not important. Everything you have read is important from exam perspective, but quick revision of your audit evidence in the mind, right? You should remember that there are types of evidence, there is methods of evidence, there is procedure related to evidence, there is reliability of audit evidence. These are some of the points that we should keep in mind. When we talk about reliability of audit evidence, we should keep in mind whether it is E to E, I to E, E to I, or I to I, right? So these are some of the points that we should keep in mind. right? And most importantly, another point that we should bear in mind when it comes to audit evidence as a topic is the procedure related to audit evidence, right? You've got one other thing which you'll always do is you will end up writing immediately compliance procedure, right? You should remember that this is a risk assessment procedure and other procedure. Other procedure includes in test of controls and substantive procedure. Compliance procedure is called as test of controls in the language of the standard, right? That is where I said your choice of words, just be a little bit conscious. And no point of getting panicking if you do not know exact word, write whatever you know. But whenever you know the exact word, be a little more conscious. Being conscious will help you make an exam paper much more standard, right? And much more professional than just being a little bit, I think, not very careful about these things. You'll end up writing a general and a common English. You have to avoid that common layman's English as much possible while you're writing the answer. Explain in layman's English, but your answer should also contain a professional language related to auditing. And I keep telling you this, that English is different than auditing, right? I speak English, but when I write auditing, I think this is something which some of you who were there in the class know this, that be careful. If you know good English doesn't mean that we know good auditing. Just get slightly conscious about the choice of the words. Do not use he, she, right? When he did audit, he should do this, right? You should maybe slightly make it professional. The auditor should consider following aspects related to the audit. Instead of, you may write this, don't write that, okay, he should consider the following. Try avoid, because he also includes she, right? We should not personalize the answer. You may want to write an answer called the auditor instead of using he, she, it, right? Those kind of personalized languages. So this is something you should be slightly conscious, like keep that in mind, that don't make an auditing question paper personalized. When you get like question that, okay, he is an auditor, how should he audit, I still prefer that you writing a professional answers than getting into a very generic English. Try avoid that. So this is audit evidence most importantly, and sufficient, appropriate audit evidence, sufficiency, appropriateness, right? Let's recollect, just recollect some of those important keywords. Have your definitions handy for keywords, because these keywords you will very often use it in the exam, right? You need to be very much aware about what is sufficiency, what is appropriateness, and what context you will have to explain these words. So be conscious about that. That's most important aspect of your auditing. Coming to chapter 4, risk assessment and internal control. Know about audit risk. Just a quick check. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. All right. So know about different types of audit risk, right? So what exactly is the component of audit risk? Inherent risk, control risk, detection risk, right? Be slightly conscious and revise your inherent risk, what it means, susceptibility, right, of account balance or class of transactions that are material either individually or when aggregated together before consideration of relevant internal controls of an entity. Just remember those slight good definitions that you would have made an effort to remember. Just one quick revision of that will help you to know the definitions much better. Inherent risk, detection risk, control risk, right? So you should also remember that the control risk does not exist if the controls does not exist. So this is something that you should remember as a pointer. And then when it comes to audit risk, it's at two levels, right? Remember, it is at account balance and class of transaction level, and it is at financial statement level, also called as presentation and disclosure level. So this whole chapter is about risk assessment and internal control. So most of the questions in this chapter will be from 315 and 330. So you know that you will have to interlink these essays when it is chapter 4. Coming to chapter 5, fraud, right? Repetitive, I think interlinks are possible. Remember interlinking specifically in the aspect of the fraud. SA 240, right? Section 143, subsection 12, right? Related to what is a procedure to be followed. Audit committee has to be informed within how many days, right? Those are the matters you should be conscious about. Conscious about guidance note on fraud reporting issued by ICAI, right? Try to interlink that. Try to interlink 315 in 240, right? There are some entries related to revenue, right? So journal entry related fraud, revenue recognition related fraud. Two types of fraud, remember, it is fraudulent financial reporting and misappropriation of assets. So we should remember these two aspects of the fraud. And I think so more or less what you should also remember when you come to fraud as a topic is that it is so vast that you might have to interlink professional skepticism, professional judgment. So one simple principle that you should follow is that maybe if a question is, let's say, for 4 marks, try to bring 2 to 3 interlinks at least. Bring it from Companies Act one point, bring it from SA one point, and write whatever you've been reading about the chapter. But do not repeat the same point again and again. For example, you defined fraud in the first line. Do not repeat fraud in the fifth or a sixth line, because examiner is watching your one entire page. It is easy for him to identify that you have repeated fraud twice, right? So ensure you don't make an attempt to fill the page. You make an attempt to explain the content, right? Make it content rich. Coming to chapter 6, automated environment, you might expect, I think, some of the questions around black box approach, white box approach. What happens in an automated environment, right? What are cats, right? What is the computer assisted audit techniques overall means? How does automated environment benefits the auditor? So keep those things handy with you, some of the pointers handy with you when you have to write this particular chapter. Sampling 530, right? Remember different types of sampling, right? You will remember statistical sampling, interval sampling, cluster sampling, block sampling, sample size, right? What exactly is sample risk means, right? There are two types of erroneous conclusions auditor can reach related to test of controls, test of details, right? So remember those keywords. Why am I spending, I think, quick summary of this? Because I know we already spoke about how to write exams. Maybe I just want to ensure your 20 minutes are very productive. You're kind of remembering all the important aspects of that particular chapter. 530, you should not forget to interlink here. Whenever there's a question on sampling, interlink 530, right? Interlink 315, because that talks about test of controls, right? Test itself is sampling. 8, analytical procedures, is fairly simpler. You kind of should know what are the different types of analytical procedures. One does reasonableness check, ratio analysis, things like that, right? So you should be conscious. Now, audit of items of financial statements, I think this is again, I guess, a very nutshell chapter. Like when you get a question on how do you audit, for example, sales, right? Do not again write generically. Try get into a structure of the answer. Like what I prefer you should do is get into a question. If the question says audit of sales, immediately your mind should flash, okay, how do I audit? 4 different aspects. What are the documents I should verify while I audit this item? Okay, there are 5 6 documents that comes to my mind. Very good. What are the assertions that I should verify while I audit this item? For example, if it is a P&L account, I will have assertions more related to occurrence, completeness, right? But if it is a balance sheet items, I'll have assertions related to existence, rights and obligation. So you know that, okay, P&L is repetitive in nature, therefore the assertions are also repetitive, whereas the balance sheet is basically one time. The assertions are existence, rights and obligation, valuation and allocation. So the assertions for balance sheet are different. So immediately think in your mind, what are the assertions that I should write? Think about what are the special connections that I need to give. For example, if it is sales, you might want to connect GST, right? Think a little bit out of the box. There are GST requirements for sales, right? I might have to talk about probably TDS, because if there is a contract and, like, there are TDS requirements, then there could be like TDS elements that I need to look at it, right? Tax deduction at source on the payments that I'll receive, right? So some of these interlinking is very important. Chapter 9 is an overall chapter. What you should be very good at is interlinking SCAs, interlinking related matters, right? If the question is, let's say, on salary, don't forget to interlink the other labor laws, right? You've already studied allied laws, which had, I think, connection to labor laws like PF, ESI, etc. So try interlink that here. How do those labor laws, talks about the matters related to financial statements related items, right? So this is something you should keep in mind. Go with whatever you have studied, but what I'm trying to say is structure your answer, right? Most of the times in auditing, what happens is we don't know where to start. This is exactly the problem in auditing. In some of the theory papers, I know the question is related to X, so I'll start with X. But in auditing, most times we'll not know where the question is from. So what you should be careful is start the answer from the question itself. See the question, pick up the words in the question, make your answer related to the words in the question, right? If there is a question on new audit engagement, sufficient information is not available, immediately you should pick those words. New audit engagement, which means I'll have to write on 510. Sufficient information is not available, which means I'll have to write about sufficient appropriate audit evidence. I should also interlink 705 because if the information is not available, which is material and pervasive, I might have to give an opinion which is disclaimer. But if information is not available, which is material and not pervasive, I'll have to give an opinion which is qualified. So keep those things in your mind in terms of what exactly that you will have to cover. Company audit is very essential. Remember the section numbers, only there was 10 sections, 139 to 148. Make a quick summary of those sections, right? One, and you know what are important sections. Immediately your brain should try to recollect some of those by heart, right? 141 subsection 3, 143 subsection 3, 139, right, subsection 2. 139 subsection 2 is rotation of auditors. 141 subsection 3 is disqualification of auditors. 143 subsection 3 is audit report related matters, right? 143 subsection 1, important for you, right? Proprietary matters. So just recollect some of those out of your study plan. Do an ABC analysis now, right? Some of these sections are must for me to remember by heart. Let me just do one quick round of revision so that the last minute revision sits in my head. Some of the sections I've not by hearted. Don't try by heart at the last minute. Now you don't open the book and say 141 subsection 3 I'll by heart. It's okay. Go with your approach. Go with whatever you have studied, whatever your teachers have taught, whatever is the shortcuts that you have made it, just go with it. No last minute preparation on things you've not prepared earlier. So I think that you should be careful. But if you've made an effort to by heart these sections, at the last minute, don't give up. Oh God, I don't remember now, right? You will remember. Just make an effort to read one more time. Automatically in exam, all of this particular concepts will flow to you. Audit report, opinion paragraph, right? I think telling people that it's very important. Opinion paragraph, one time you should just remember, try to revise about it. There are two types of opinions broadly: unmodified opinion, modified opinion. Modified opinion is of three types: qualified opinion, adverse opinion, and disclaimer of opinion. So this is something that you should bear it in mind when you talk about audit report as a concept. Keep in mind about some of the recent changes in the audit report, right? For example, opinion paragraph comes first. From a MCQ perspective, you will have to be conscious about the contents of audit report, which comes after what, which comes before what. Just get the contents of audit report right. For modification and for unmodified audit report, what are the different contents? You have to remember it starts with title, then it goes to opinion, right? Then it goes to basis of opinion, then key audit matter, then material uncertainty over going concern, right? Then management responsibility, auditor's responsibility, legal matters, emphasis of matter, other matter paragraph, signature. So remember what are all these simple in your own revision ways. You remember this audit report format. Chapter 12 is audit of banks. Again, remember bullet pointers on, how do you audit certain items of banks? Like, bank means they collect deposits and they lend loans, right? So most importantly, therefore, what will come in banks? Either advances audit or maybe the loans audit, because those are the two important aspects of the bank audit. So you'll have to slightly gather all your thoughts. Okay, these are all the pointers I should write for core banking business. You can't expect sales, right? Audit of sales and audit of banks, because bank doesn't sell, right? They give loans and they earn interest income. So you have to be careful and conscious about the terminologies that you use when you're talking about banks. It has to be banking language: negotiable instrument, advances, right? Verification, cash balances. So try to get that banking language in your answer. Similarly, different types of entities. I'll go back to chapter 9. Similar approach that you follow for chapter 9, for 13 you should follow. I will not, I think, spend too much time now. Again, I quickly summarize 14 chapters for you. What is most important points I told you is interlinking SCAs is important. Write sections wherever you know. Write the case laws. For example, you've done some case laws in auditing also, right? Kingston Cotton Mills, Royal Mail Steam Engineering Company. You have done some of the case laws. Remember whatever the case laws that you have done, just to ensure that you quote the case law in a relevant answer. Keywords are very, very important. Underline in exam each of the keyword. Do not underline whole paper. Now, because I said underline keyword, not everything you write is key. Okay, what examiner believes should be keyword is what you should underline. For example, of some of the keywords: test of details, test of controls, professional skepticism, uh, PDCMM, prevent, detect, correct material misstatement, right? So talk about ABCT, account balance and class of transactions. SAAE, sufficient appropriate audit evidence, right? Some of these are keywords of auditing. Modified opinion, unmodified opinion, emphasis of matter, adverse opinion, material uncertainty, overgoing concern, right? Preconditions for an audit, applicable financial reporting framework. So some of these are key related words. Ensure that you underline keywords, and auditing is a combination of keywords. This is something I think I've been learning, that as Indians, I think our English vocabulary may carry like 80,000 words, right? But I think if as students, if I have to put, maybe an examiner's vocabulary may be much more stronger. So what you should do is, if you've got a strong vocabulary, strong words in your mind dictionary, start highlighting to examiner, like this is something which even I know. Some of these are good words, right? And differentiate between accounting and audit question. What happens? Let's say there's a question on how do you audit, for example, hire purchase sales. Okay, immediately do not write accounts there, you write auditing related matters. Like, they're not asking you how to do hire purchase accounting. What they're asking you is, how do you audit that? What documents you will verify? What are the points that you have to look at it? So just be careful. Do not write AS9 in auditing. You should interlink AS9, but I'm not asking you to write AS9. What we are asking in exam is, how do you audit AS9? So get into a shoes of the auditor. Come away from accountants and get into the shoes of the auditor. Even if it's an accounting question, auditing aspects are important. You should write procedures related to audit, methods related to audit. These are some things that you need to write. Now, talking about company law and auditing questions, again, some of the questions could be law oriented. For example, 141 subsection 3, you got a disqualification of auditor question. Now, this is more law oriented question. So bring more aspects of a law there and write the way you write law answers, right? You get facts of the case, provisions and analysis and conclusion. And do not overwrite the facts. Just write the facts in simple two-liners. Do not like confuse an examiner by writing the entire question back in paper. Don't write like half a page of the facts. Facts is all about just a liner. This question is about identification of disqualification of an auditor. Right? That's it. What is this that you're trying to do? Two liners of the facts, like very simple facts is important. Don't overwrite facts and underwrite analysis. What is important in case studies? Most of the analysis is important. So keep that in mind. Differentiate between those terminologies: definition, explain, discuss, comment, examine. If the question is about discuss, you don't define and leave. You should discuss. If the question is on definition, don't write 4 pages, because expectation is definition, right? So differentiate what is that they're asking in the exam. I think these are some things I would have already told you, maybe some of you attended the law revision, that don't be panic, read the question again and again, keep interlinking in mind. Do not assume that you don't know the answer. You will 100% know the answer. Just read the question again and you will get the answer. Don't use wrong section numbers. Don't use wrong case laws. Write whatever you know about it, right? I think more or less, I guess those are quick summary. I think I was very fast and very quick, but we still have a minute more to talk about it. So I'll still go to all the best slide and wait for you if you have some questions. Was this like helpful? It was like a very rapid summary, but is it worth of your time?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. A lot of, I think, keywords is what we tried summarizing. I don't want to repeat the same thing that we've been talking to you on the revision. From exam perspective, you're clear. Use black pen, carry, what you need to carry. All of that, I'm sure you're clear. What I want you to be additionally clear is write auditing in auditing, right? Do not write English in auditing. Be conscious about choice of words. Very good presentation is important in exam. So anything else you want to ask me? All right, so no story for you. I'm very conscious about your time, but I will again ask you to repeat the story that I told you on the law exam. No regrets for the past, right? Never ever go anything which goes against your common sense. Write what you know in exam, right? You have to give the best regard to what you know. You will 100% get through this exam. I wish you all the very best for auditing exam. Do very well. I'm very confident that you will do very well in exam.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
All
Thank
the
you,
very
ma'am.
best. No stress,
Thank
just
you,
breathe
ma'am.
Absolutely.
ma'am.
So just breathe 5 times whenever you're feeling stressed. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in,
Thank you, ma'am.
breathe out. Relax, read well. Okay. Great. And thank you for this time.